Question of the day. My first 10 miles of the day, followed by 6 sprints. Later today, still no one's joining me. But Thursday, I got someone joining me for a couple miles. And, but the question of the day is, so I'm guessing this is going to be more for guys, but maybe it could be for girls. How many of you out there can say, yeah, I do what I want when I want, and I don't get nagged about it? I ask this question because it's a common theme in conversations, typically with people that know that we live in the Dominican Republic. Oh my gosh, Devin, I would love to do what you guys are doing. My wife, though, she won't do it. I'm like, oh, actually, really, I mean, we own, like, you know, multiple houses. You could become part of the mission. Like, we turned it into an international nonprofit organization. You could actually join us. Like, we have multiple houses. All you have to do is give a slightly bigger care about other people than yourself, and then help us change the world. But the default seems to be like, I'd love to, but this other person. And I was thinking about that as I was doing my 10 miles this morning. Like, why is that? Because I have the opposite problem. I'm like, Chelsea, I really need some guidance here. I am struggling, especially being back in this godforsaken, dark, dreary state. Like, my brain's in major shutdown mode. My nervous system just wants to go in hibernation mode so bad, and that feels dark, and it's like, I could just use some guidance. I got a lot of big things coming up. And she's like, nope, I trust you. Well, fuck. I wish my wife nagged me more. And, but I was observing one of my good friends, Blaine. And so Blaine, when we switched over from a clinic model to a church model, I taught Blaine how to adjust and had him start taking care of members. And he had this desire to develop his own mission center where he could take care of families, be a resource of drug-free, natural healing for families, Christ-centered care. And like when he was like, yeah, I'm in, we ended up doing, we were running like 3 or 4 days a week. Within a short period of time, he's up to running longer than he has for like 20 years since high school. He lost weight, super driven. He's like, you know what, I'm taking over this home renovation that I've been putting off for ever, 8 years, living in just like dilapidated, like with 5 kids, just not unsanitary, but like, you can imagine it's just be taxing, just living in unfinished projects always. And so it's like, I'm doing it. So then I'm like telling him, like, why is this? Where's this motivation come from? He says, I'm just tired of being a fat fuck. His words, not mine. And now they're mine because he used them. So he said, I'm tired of it. I'm done. We go to the DR. And then it was interesting because I've been messaging with Blaine as we've been gone. And I just gradually watched him revert back. Stopped running. Stopped doing the cold plunges. Stopped eating healthy. Gained all the weight back. And then ended up developing almost like this victim mentality of like, I can't do these things because of these other people, my family, whatever it is, this contractor. It was like, conversation went from like, I'm doing this, to like this victim status. You know, so I can't help but like unpack the neurology behind it. Because there is this default hardwiring that we have within our nervous system that is built into us like from childhood. And the majority of us that are alive now, it is pretty consistent to be born into an unhealthy environment, into stress, into trauma, into struggle, strife, whatever it is. And that programs our nervous system to be in a stay mode, conservation mode. And that becomes our default. That becomes our go-to automatic pilot, so to speak. And so when I was here and I was then affecting Blaine, then I was able to challenge his default. In essence, my standard then made him rise it up to form a new standard for himself. But as soon as I was there, or as soon as I wasn't there, my standard is no longer there. So therefore, what happens? The default kicks back in. And the default of stay mode, conservation mode, blame everybody else because the nervous system is saying, we're waiting to be told what to do. And so therefore, everyone around me is the reason why I'm not doing the thing I need to do. And it's their fault. And so then when I come back and I'm re-engaged Blaine, and I'm like, all right, man, you ready to get back to training? And his answer is no. And I think this, in essence, is the root behind the wanting to do what one wants to do and then being nagged at, specifically by wives. Because I have this funny belief system that when you make a promise to marry somebody and stay with them forever, then that's because you care about that other human being. I know, that's crazy. And I don't know if this is a newsflash to anybody, but women are more caring than men. So that nagging is simply a default of someone caring, right? But does it feel good to nag? No. And really that's I think that what I've observed as I watch our friends' marriages break apart, and then they pretend to fix it, and then they go back to their ways of just hiding all the things and then putting on a happy face, is that there's two options. Either A, nag more, right, which doesn't feel good for the woman and doesn't feel good for the man. And with Blaine, I even had the conversation with him, like, what the fuck, dude? How do you take on a project, get so far behind, gain a bunch of weight, and then not be anxious to get back to where you were killing it and healthy and strong? And then this is the statement I've heard from so many men. Are you ready? I know my body. And my response to him was, well, how's that working out for you? Pretty good. Really? In what ways? Well, I just got a lot going on right now. And then I was in really good shape when I was in the military. And this is so true of military people. And hey, Dr. Brico, is they will default. So this is good, Skylar, if you have any PTSD patients. Because their default will always go back to the last period where they perceived that they had control. And so for him, last time he was in shape was in the military, which is where they literally told him what to do, and he listened to them. And now you can see where this is tricky for the nagging wife and the husband that wants to do what he wants to do without being nagged at, is that the default will switch to dorsal vagal, which is to be fat, lazy, and for lack of a better word, indecisive. And because it's conservation mode, stay mode. And so the wife sees this. She's like, I married someone that was going to be a protector, a leader, a servant, safety, strong. And so then the nagging is simply them trying to hold them to a standard, but being unable to. Because the odds are that other person's nervous system is also stuck in a dorsal vagal shutdown response. And this is why you look at couples, as they get married, they get in shape, get married, and they slowly gain weight, get out of shape, get softer, get sadder, have more exhaustion. And then the default is like, blame the kids. All right, well, you know how it is. You get kids and things just go downhill. So, in my book, I talk about the BS, or the belief systems that are an after effect. They become the reason we give ourselves, but no doubt there's simply a story explaining why we believe that we are the way we are. Because actually the data shows that people that continue to have kids, their body actually keeps them younger longer. So that's the tricky bit. Okay, so then what do we do about this? So, okay, we have guy wants to do what he wants to do, not getting nagged when he wants to do it, and you have the person that's nagging. Well, option number one, stop nagging. Okay, so then what ends up happening is there's two outcomes of this one neurologically. In order for said woman to stop nagging, they have to either A, not care, which means they are actively disengaged from the relationship, and that's the worst option. Or deep down inside, they just hate themselves, have to become disassociated, and then they hate their husband. And then resentment just grows. It's not a super good option, although it seems to be like a pretty popular one. Saying, you know, I'm not their parent, right? Or number two is to hold said person to a standard. And so, and you know, and I don't know if you've ever take time to like reflect back on your year. I think it's a good exercise, or a year, or a month, or week, or whatever it is, because I think for me it gives me a greater appreciation for God's perfect timing, because all of the truly incredible things that happened in my life have been directly related to the most soul-crushing and breaking, which helps to reframe my mind when things are bad, and also helps me reframe my mind when things are good. So I was reflecting back on this predicament that I'm now in with my wife, and I'm like, little guidance, what do you think? Nothing. And I realized it's because she's literally trained me over the last 18 years to be a person that is congruent. And she didn't just do it directly. She did it directly. Like, so for example, when we first started dating, it was, I remember it vividly. I was a little bit of a man slut, and Chelsea was very much the opposite. She's like a Christian, virgin, innocent girl. I thought it was like a secret. I thought it was a joke, right? I didn't even think that existed anymore when we met. And it's like, sure you are. And so then it took me about a month to get Chelsea to go out with me. And then pretty early on in dating, she informed me that with absolute certainty that there's no way she was going to be dating me longer than 3 years without an engagement. Because there's two reasons to date, and that's to have fun and to find the person you're going to marry. I didn't even want to get married at this point. And so point number 2 was that she's like, I'm not having sex before marriage. And I thought, yeah, right, let's see about that. Okay, so a lot of stories in between then and the next timeline, but I ended up proposing on a 3 anniversary. And then after 4 years of abstinence, she held me to my word. And neurologically, what does this mean for men? Well, and it really roots back to why I named my second book, Get Paid and Get Laid, is because our driving factors within our nervous system come from our prefrontal cortex and our substantia nigra. So the substantia nigra is what produces dopamine. It is what gives us energy. It is the reason why I can run 16 miles a day and then 20 plus on the weekends with 5 to 7 hours of sleep every night. It produces raw power. Problem is, it becomes weakened with processed food, with exposure to technology, with drugs, and with alcohol. And does that mean that I've abstained from all those things? Nope. I recently quit drinking, but I've drank excessive amounts of alcohol for a decade plus. I got addicted to pain pills, muscle relaxers, smoked copious amounts of weed in high school after I broke my back in a roller car accident. My substantia nigra has been plenty damaged. So for anyone that's like, oh man, I just might be too far gone. Oh hell no, not even close. You want to do a side-by-side comparison? I'll have out-damaged you easy. I mean, there's this true blue meth addicts and heroin addicts that got me beat, but I don't know. We'll do side-by-side. Because the truth is, our brain has the ability to create neuroplasticity and to repair itself and strengthen itself. And repairing doesn't mean simply healing. Repairing means making stronger because of damage. So if you are finding yourself unmotivated, depressed, sad, anxious, guarded, exhausted, it's because your substantia nigra has been significantly either damaged or atrophied. And so based on how much damage or atrophy has occurred really means it has the potential to be very strong. So, right now, I am running. I have the goal to run a sub 640 minute per mile per minute pace on New Year's Eve. And I'm not in good enough shape to do that right now. So, I'm pounding 16 miles into my body every day. In order to train myself to be able to do that goal at the end of this month. By challenging a system over and over and then creating neuroplasticity, any system can be strengthened. So the act of strengthening the substantia nigra is the same exact way. So now, this is where it becomes confusing, often for a lot of people, because when you apparently it's easy to hook up with people now with online like dating apps and stuff like that. That does not strengthen the substantia nigra. The act of not hooking up with somebody is what strengthens the substantia nigra. The act of pursuing is what strengthens the substantia nigra. And so in essence, the whole 4 years I was dating my wife, she was training my substantia nigra in order to then accomplish my goal, which was to marry my wife. So this gets a little tricky now because so many relationships have lost that component. So then what do? Do you simply say, okay, we're going to abstain for some period of time? Yeah, you could do that. Or do you say, I'm going to cut out technology, do a detox, technology detox? Yeah, you could do that. Or do you say, I'm going to train for this race, because exercise, specifically running, strengthens the substantia nigra? Yeah, you could do that. But do you want to? That's the question. And that's the question that is a little bit hard for a lot of people to answer and answer accurately. Like, for example, my friend Blaine, do you want to get back to where you were? Nope. And you might say, God, that seems so stupid. Like, how could you be in this position where it's like, you're in better shape, you have more energy, you have more time, you have more joy, you have more clarity, you have more focus, you have more peace. How would anyone not want to choose that? Well, it goes back to, again, our default wiring, our default mode of dorsal vagal response. And it's deeply rooted, that's a hardware again, and it's deeply rooted into our software, which is our belief systems, our bad software, which are deeply rooted in how we were trained from a very early age. So for example, Skylar, I don't know if you're still on here, but I'm going to unwind some neurology for you. This will help with your patient education for your parents, especially if you take care of a lot of kids with sensory processing issues. So the strength of the amygdala is developed in utero in the mama. So when there is increase in cortisol during pregnancy for the mom, she has a downregulation of neurotensin, which then downregulates the vagus nerve development and upregulates the amygdala development. And that's the common denominator, and especially as like it's a common denominator in autism kids also, are kids that have symptoms that have been labeled autism. This downregulation of vagus nerve function, upregulation of amygdala, meaning increased sensitivity and emotional reactivity and decreased ability to be able to rev their body down. Okay, so stress mama has cortisol, develops this baby that has a hard time calming itself down, and then also has a huge, very excitatory emotional response. Okay, so baby then is delivered most often, most common in the hospital, most common, most often with some kind of intervention, meaning Pitocin or some kind of forceps or vacuum where they pull the baby out by the neck. That causes damage to the upper cervical spine. That then causes a localized inflammatory response, which then further inhibits the function of the vagus nerve, or the baby's ability to then rev itself down. But it also inhibits their brain's development, because baby's development of the brain is forward fed through movement patterns in the spine. So that baby's neck was damaged. The baby has a hard time turning its neck. And it's not just like, oh, this baby has a hard time latching. It's that this baby is now unable to develop their brain because they can't activate the mechanoreceptors in the spine. Okay, so then parents then take the baby to the doctor. Oh, it's colicky. They'll grow out of it. And then they grow into a baby that then has ear infections because the upper cervical spine can't drain. And then they get put on antibiotics, kills the gut biome, which is also controlled by the vagus nerve. So now they neurologically don't have the control of circulation within their gut, which is why they're constipated, which is why they have intermittent episodes of diarrhea, to then no pooping at all, or they're bedwetters. And again, if you look at autism spectrum symptoms, these are all textbook. This is not a thing that we've labeled that's been caused by these medical interventions. It is neuroanatomy that is reinforced by these interventions. So then this child then ends up being ADHD, sensory processing, and the whole time the parents are like, we have this child, something is wrong with them, therefore we take them to this person who then says, yeah, they'll just grow out of it, and they grow into the next thing. So you can see how deeply rooted these software issues are in someone's story, right? Oh, I was always just a high energy kid. I can't focus. That's why I have a hard time. Oh, I've just always had a hard time communicating my feelings. Hard time completing tasks. It's all built within this neurodevelopment. But again, like I said before, it's not impossible to unwind. It's just a matter of unwinding it. So when it's a child, it's really easy. You just adjust them. Reestablish normal motion within the spine. The brain is highly active developmentally at that point. That's why kids require so much sleep. And then the kids then balance out the brain, balance out the nervous system, regain their functional ability. And then it's just one of those things where, oh yeah, I was a little bit of a challenging kid, but it wasn't that bad. For adults, it gets a little more complicated because the neuroanatomy is now locked into protection mode. And so when you start to adjust that cervical spine, start to activate the brainstem, the prefrontal cortex, the vagus nerve, start to increase healing, then there starts to be rapid changes that happen within the brain. And it's like 70, it's like significant for 25 minutes or something like that after the chiropractic adjustment. The problem though is it is in protection mode. So the protection mode is aggressively protecting the default. And now the question comes up in the person's mind, like, why am I doing this? Or question number 2, does this even work? And the funny thing is the first question, why am I doing this? That's a little harder to answer for guys because it's super easy to say, that doesn't work. Didn't work for me. And so my friend Blaine, as I'm like, hey, let's get back into training. He's like, well, I mean, running is just too hard on my body. I'm too heavy. So the weight on my joints causes damage. But I will gladly do rucking. I'll ruck. I'll put a heavier backpack. I said, so if you have too much weight right now on your knees, and that damages your knees, quote unquote, your theory is that adding more weight will then be better. Well, and here's where, again, it's like, that's stupid, right? Well, everyone knows running's hard on you. It's funny because our species existed because we could run and run down animals regularly in order to then survive where all the other human species died off during the melting of the ice age. So the whole running is hard on you and bad, that sounds like a really good campaign for medicine to continue to make tons of money off of 6 people. Because our bodies with our big butts, big glutes, and our big brains are meant to run. And this is where I found with men, they need to run in order to work through that default mechanism. Because again, that dorsal vagal store mode, save mode, protect mode, wait mode is always looking for the easier way out to conserve energy. And running is, hands down, the only activity where you have to continuously tell your brain to keep going. But I have not answered the question of why, right? Because that's the answer. Why am I doing this? Because it cannot be for another person. I'm gonna take that back. For people that have kids, the answer, the kids are the best driver. But for people that don't have kids, the answer cannot be for anyone else. And in my book, I go through the whole neurological unwinding process of like questions, exercises. And part of it's about having the questions in order to come up with the answers and then leveraging the amygdala, the fight or flight mechanism, in order to then forward feed into the substantia nigra and the prefrontal cortex. And what I found is the most effective way is for the answer why initially is find someone that you just do not like. That's pretty easy for all the liberals in Washington State. I don't know why I hate this guy, but I do. Because he's bad. It's not me. Well, it's me for quite a few, but find someone that you do not like. Unless this person is in really good shape, don't do that person. Find a fat person, which is the majority of people. And then just simply find another person that's in shape. And then simply say, I don't want to be like that person that I hate. I want to be like this person that I like. And that's why I think a lot of people resonate with David Goggins and Andrew Tate, because it's like, this guy is awesome and doesn't give a fuck about anybody else. So, and that is the first step. I don't want to be like this person that I hate, who's a fat, lazy slob, bad dad, bad whatever. I do want to be like this person. And that'll be enough for the brain to hold on. And then the next step, so that's initial motivation. Now, if you remember, the other part of the substantia nigra is developing a standard that you're working towards, and which means a measurable objective accomplishment. For me, I marry my wife, have sex, right? And so therefore, I knew when I had reached my goal, my brain was then happy, right? And I'm gonna go ahead and say it, virgin sex is awful. And did my brain need to know that? No. Because then the next objective is like, how do I then have great sex with a wife who is new to having this whole sex thing, and anatomy needs to change, and therefore new goal, new outcome. And so with running, in order to utilize the energy from the amygdala to override that default dorsal vagal response of shutdown, conserve, guard, the only way that I've seen patients, clients, friends succeed is that they sign up for a race and then tell everyone they're doing it, because the social accountability holds them to it. And then if you want to further the success, is find someone who will do it with you. In fact, I didn't used to be a runner, because you know why? Because I hated running, because it's awful and it's stupid. Who would just go do something for hours and hours when I can just work out for half an hour in the gym? Some high intensity workouts. It's quote unquote better anyways. That was me for a very long time, until my fat, lazy, liberal, spoiled, poli-science major brother-in-law, whose dad's a medical doctor, after talking about Gatorade and goo, says, my dad, who's a doctor, who's a real doctor, says you can't run a marathon without Gatorade and goo packs. So I'd never run more than 7 miles at a time at that point, because running was stupid again. I said I could run a marathon without Gatorade, goo packs, or water with an 8-minute mile pace, easy. And he said, I bet you $50 you can't. So then that started my running journey. 2 months later, got third place in my age division, Quad Cities Marathon, Davenport, Iowa. And then my friend paced me on it, and then she was on team, can't be done with the Gatorade and the goo, can't be done. And so she paced me for half the marathon, ran a minute per mile faster than she'd ever run. And so she was a super itty bitty runner body. She ran like rain or snow. Like, I'd run multiple marathons at this point. And so I told her, I said, Allie, you know, like you could run a marathon easily at the pace you just did and qualify for the Boston Marathon, which is something that was important to her. So I said, hey, I'll make a bet with you. I said, no, I don't realize this is such a powerful tool, the wager, right? I'll make a bet with you. You qualify for Boston, I'll qualify for Boston. Which then committed me to then being a runner. And then it took me 7 years to figure out how to run faster. And Skylar, if you're still on here, I'll tell you the secret. Here's the secret. You ready? 7 years. I trained the exact amount, exact same I trained, going completely clean diet, better fueling, and the secret to running, to going from an 8-minute mile pace to a sub 7-minute mile pace, was simply getting adjusted more while I was training, and then leveraging neuroplasticity. Like, it took me 7 years to take my advice that I give to people, because I was only getting adjusted like every 2 weeks at that point, which is what maintenance adjustments were. So could not figure out why I could not run faster, because I was maintaining the same level of care. So, and in essence, because I became a runner, I then became a person that got involved with the Runners Club, and then became the president of the Runners Club. I then became the person that has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for nonprofits through the Runners Club, which then became a person that has so much dopamine producing in my brain that even no matter what has come up in life, no matter how big or how scary, for example, like during the pandemic, when everyone's like, you have to put a mask on, I'm like, I'm not putting a mask on now, I'm not putting a mask on later, I'm not telling my patients they need to put a mask on, and you can go ahead and try to make me if you want, but the answer is still going to be the same. It's because I was a runner. It's because I had strengthened my substantia nigra, and it's because my wife had held me to a standard that if I say something, I better do it. In essence, that's how you do what you want when you want, without getting nagged about it. If you want more exercises, go to drugfreehappykids.org and check out my book. Okay, I'm gonna finish this bad boy off. I'll see you tomorrow. I do sprint drills in the afternoon, but it's a little tricky to talk at a 6 mile pace. See if I can